Best PS4 Games 2020. Play great PlayStation 4 games. These are the best PS4 games available today. From Sony's awesome exclusives to third-party must-plays. Welcome to T3's Best PS4 Games Guide for 2020. This guide has been carefully curated to provide a top-tier roundup of only the very best PlayStation 4 games available today. Every game on this list has 1-hour approval, so you can be sure that each one of these titles deliver and would be a great addition to your PS4 collection. Since its release in 2013, the PlayStation 4 has built a library of diverse and rewarding games playable on the vanilla PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 Slim and PlayStation 4 Pro. So, we've gathered together the creme de la creme of third-party must-haves and first-party exclusives for your choice of PS4. We've even included the very best and brightest for PSVR. There are some amazing games available right now on PlayStation 4, including Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Marvel's Spider-Man, Apex Legends, God of War, Star Wars Jedi, Fallen Order, Death Stranding, Control, Days Gone, Untitled Goose Game, Resident Evil 2 and many more. PS4 has a huge library of great games and more are still to come in 2020. Including The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima and more. And now's a great time to build out your PS4 games library with some of these amazing titles. That's because we're now firmly in the first half of the year game, which is prone to see some seriously impressive sales at game retailers. This is because so few new games get released in the few first months of each year. Publishers and retailers try to maintain sales by slashing profits on their existing game stock. As such, there are not just loads of top PS4 games to play right now, but many are available at tasty discounted price points, too. And, as you're a fan of all things PlayStation, as well as bringing you the best PS4 game deals here in this guide, we've also got dedicated guides to the best DualShock 4 deals for all your PlayStation controller needs, best PS4 deals for all your console needs, as well as all the best PlayStation VR deals going right now as well in case you're looking to expand your PS4's capabilities. With all that said, here is T3's definitive list of the best PlayStation 4 games you can get your hands on right now. Sony's investment in its first-party studios continues to pay dividends with the release of another successful new IP on PS4. Ghost of Tsushima comes from Sucker Punch, the same studio that welcomed in the PS4 with infamous Second Son. Thankfully, its new project has a lot more personality than that 6-year-old middling open-world experience. Ghost of Tsushima tells the tale of an island community that faces the brutality of an invading Mongol army, and how one man's samurai code will be pushed to its limits in the struggle for survival. The sword combat can be challenging, evoking the speed and positioning of For Honor, but with a strong focus on stealth, think Tenchu. There's plenty of room for creative samurai, ninja action. While it's very much a faithful recreation of the original, the developers have incorporated many of FF's evolved systems. The remake of Final Fantasy VII has been in development for so long the current generation of consoles is now nearing the end of the time at the top of the hardware mountain. But fondness has indeed made the heart grow fonder as the first part of Final Fantasy VII Remake arrives on PS4. The game a full-on remake of the original, with the same story of Cloud Strife and co., only now with contemporary, and frankly, gorgeous, visuals that really bring the world back up to date while retaining that futuristic quality. Combat and exploration incorporate real-time and turn-based elements, and the addition of side missions and more open-world elements only helped elevate an already stellar experience. This is also the first half of the game, with a second and final installment still in development. The Mosu genre isn't exactly waning in popularity, with that Dynasty Warriors template, where one or more players takes on hundreds of enemies in large, open-ended sandboxes, extending to other popular franchises including Fire Emblem and The Legend of Zelda. In fact, one of the most popular is based on popular Japanese anime One Piece, and its fourth installment looks to be the biggest one yet. One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 continues the long-running anime's story, featuring a huge number of playable characters including Straw Hat's Legend Luffy and many more. To break up all that melee action, you can also complete various mission types as you unleash piratical chaos across large, open-ended maps. When Resident Evil 3, Nemesis first arrived in 1999, it offered up a survival horror experience that maintained the building dread of the first two games while adding in a more action-orientated setup with more enemies and bigger set pieces. And, of course, the seemingly invulnerable Nemesis creature that pursued you periodically. In 2020, that same game is getting the modern remake treatment, with all the same horror tropes brought up to date with new voice acting, photorealistic visuals and more, alongside the more third-person shooter approach to gameplay. The remake also includes a 4-player co-op mode called Resistance, which sees you and up to 3 other players battling the mutated undead in an intense PvE setup that's a welcome addition to an already impressive package. The demons you need to slay are tougher than ever, so expect plenty of new weapons with which to deal death and justice. 4 years on and Bethesda's reboot of Doom continues. Doom Eternal takes the bloody and powerful take on the classic corridor FPS, where you, the titular Doom guy, takes on the forces of hell in a gore-soaked fight for the future of humanity. Its campaign is ridiculous fun, where you'll use your trusty super shotgun to blast demons into pieces. A good twist this time around sees certain execution styles producing different drops, such as health and armor. The traditional multiplayer deathmatch modes featured in the 2016 reboot, instead opting for a more objective-focused approach with battle mode. Here, you'll find a number of fun ways that take smaller player counts, such as one that pits one player as the Slayer, and 2 others as demons, and offers fun setups that are all about using demonic powers and modifiers. Nioh 2 might sound like another Dark Souls rip-off, but Team Ninja's new offering is truly its own challenging beast. While many wrote off the first Nioh as nothing more than a Souls-like, a game similar in style and difficulty as the popular Dark Souls series, Team Ninja proved the mix of Japanese folklore and creative enemy design could be a real winner, especially when From Software's Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice failed to live up to the hype. With Nioh 2, the team has introduced new ideas while doubling down on the memorable boss fights and the small margin for error. Unlike the likes of the Surge 2, which also falls into this same genre, Nioh 2 introduces new ideas to the mix to help carve out its own identity. The strength and fluidity of its combat model, which is far more aggressive, similar in some ways to Bloodborne, and the addition of new weapons, such as the switchglaive and the dual hatchets, alongside more powerful yokai attacks makes this a real treat for those that love a deep and nuanced challenge. Dreams comes from Media Molecule, the creators of Little Big Planet, another fine creative suite and PlayStation exclusive. There are plenty of games out there built around the idea of creation. Minecraft took over the gaming world with the premise, after all, but few have been able to hold a candle to Media Molecule's output. Little Big Planet helped gamers create their very own platforming wonders. But with Dreams, its long gestating new project, players can create almost any style of game or experience. You can control and manipulate everything from animations and assets to backgrounds and textures. Consider Dreams as a blank canvas on which you can create everything from first-person shooters to fully fledged sports sims. You can also share your creations with others, and even splice one project into another. Some games are so convincing you wouldn't even know it was created in Dreams with a DualShock 4 controller. There are a lot of different enemy variants to take down with traps, rifles, elemental weapons and more. With a new Sniper Elite in development, and a couple of well-received ports to Nintendo Switch, Rebellion has turned its attention to one of its other WW2 set franchises. Zombie Army 4: Dead War firmly picks up the baton from Zombie Army Trilogy, offering up a co-op-focused third-person shooter that manages to be ever louder, sillier and more bombastic than its predecessors. If you've never heard of the series before, it combines the creative zombie hordes of Left 4 Dead and combines it with the razor-sharp ballistics the Sniper Elite series has been perfecting since the PS2 era. Rebellion has taken a few elements from its underrated new IP Strange Brigade, which a bigger focus on cooperative play and elemental powers that enable players to call down bolts of lightning and summon jets of fire. It's very silly, and incredibly tongue-in-cheek. But it's also far more tactical than, say, Call of Duty's long-running zombies mode. It's certainly not a reinvention since the last game, and it lacks the simplistic purity of the main Shay series. But as a co-op shooter it's great fun. As the current generation enters its twilight years, PS4 players are able to experience some of the best games of that generation, and the one that preceded it, in handy collected editions. Enter the Batman Arkham Collection. Collecting together one of the most visually impressive games of this gen, the 5-year-old Arkham Knight with the remastered versions of Arkham City and Arkham Asylum. Now you can experience Rocksteady's entire action-adventure trilogy in all its glory. The game includes every piece of DLC released for all 3 games, including the huge raft of skins that were produced for Arkham Knight back in 2015, so the sheer amount of content on offer is staggering. It's frustrating that the collection doesn't include the criminally underrated and consistently overlooked Batman Arkham Origins. But despite this omission, it's still an impressive package that's packed with value. While its looks might not be up to FIFA or Madden standards, it's still a decent step up from Rugby 18. Rugby games never quite ascended to the quality levels of football, gridiron and basketball, but over the years we've had some really great, if slightly wonky, simulations. Unfortunately, those days seem like a distant memory, as most entries, bar the decent Rugby League Live series, tend to be a little too low budget to really compete with modern tastes. Rugby 20 hopes to dispel those connotations with a package that's a definite step up from the mess that was Rugby 20. For a start, it's visually a noticeable improvement. We're nowhere near FIFA levels of facial scanning, but overall players look more like humans than dressed potatoes. On-pitch AI has also been overhauled, with players behaving and reacting with far more realism as phases develop. This ties directly into Rugby 20's strongest improvement, its new tactics system. Working in a similar fashion to the tried and tested playbook system from Madden, you can now adjust and execute key plays to ensure you claim rugby glory domestically and on an international scale. You can play through the career mode in Our Tennis 2 solo, or play cooperatively with a friend in doubles. When tennis games used to be in vogue, the likes of Virtua Tennis and the Top Spin series helped walk the challenging line between Mario Tennis-style arcade action and proper sports simulation. And while the Our Tennis franchise isn't quite up to that standard, not yet, at least, Our Tennis 2 is a significant step in the right direction with new changes to career mode, on-court mechanics and more. The success of EA's recent narrative-laced career modes, such as FIFA's The Journey, has clearly had some influence on Big Ant Studios' direction for Our Tennis 2. With lots of story beats peppered in among matches and training. It's nothing particularly revolutionary, but it does help make an extended play far more rewarding. You can create both a player and new courts in the academy, and relive classic moments from tennis history in the scenario editor, before you start designing your own. While everyone's been overjoyed, disappointed with the long-gestating return of Shenmue, the Yakuza series has been quietly mastering the same formula for 15 years. And over the course of 7 main games, and 2 spin-offs, it's grown into one of the best games to ever come out of Japan. The entire saga of gangster-turned-family man Kazuma Kiryu, from his earliest days as an enforcer in the 1980s to the dramatic finale in Yakuza 6 Book of Life, are finally collected together for Western fans to enjoy on a single platform. With so many different entries to cover, Sega has gone out of its way to create performance parity between each one. So expect 1080p and 60 FPS from all versions. Content that was taken out of the Japanese versions for their respective Western releases have mostly been restored as well. So every remake and remaster will be as complete as can be when you board this collection up on PS4. Back in 2015, Swedish DJ Tim Avicii Bergling began working with developer Hello There Games to create an action RTYHM game that combined his own musical creations with serene and engaging visual landscapes. When he took his own life in 2018, the Swedish studio chose to continue with the game and finish it in his memory. The result is a fast and frenetic experience, much in the same vein as Amplitude, where you guide a ship along a colorful track in time to some of Avicai's biggest dance floor hits. It's not the most challenging of games out there, but with support for both single and multiplayer sessions and a suitably killer soundtrack. It's a great way to have fun and support the Mental Health Awareness and Suicide Prevention Foundation established in Bergling's name. You can steal items and leave them in hard-to-reach places as part of your mischievous goosey exploits. One of the most acclaimed indie games of the year has finally come to PS4. Yes, House's sleeper hit Untitled Goose Game has waddled onto Sony's top console hardware, bringing with it an unusual mix of exploration, environmental and avian hijinks. You play, unsurprisingly, a goose who has decided to unleash its inner demon and start terrorizing the unfortunately situated residents of a local village. Chase people into their homes, steal special items and adorn the occasional hat in your quest to cause bird-based chaos. If you've never played a Doom game and you've always wanted to try one, then the Doom Slayers collection is the perfect way to experience them all. Shooters might be all about online services, battle passes and loot these days, but they can all trace their lineage back to one iconic blueprint, Doom. The original paired intricate level design with punchy gunplay. And here it's finally packaged together with the games that follows in its footsteps, Doom 2. Doom 3 and the 2016 reboot of sorts. Doom 2 was very much a bigger and more intense version of the original game, while Doom 3 went a little bit left field with a greater focus on horror. The most recent version tapped back into Doom's roots with a bloody and brilliant single-player campaign and a set of multiplayer deathmatch modes that tapped back into classic FPS shooters. Now they're all together in one package. Grab it now before Doom Eternal stomps more demons in 2020. The Terminator franchise hasn't had the smoothest of rides in the world of video games. And all those less than desirable tie-ins certainly haven't helped. Polish developer Tejon is hoping to change that with Terminator Resistance, a first-person shooter based in the war-torn future where humanity fights for survival against the robotic onslaught of Skynet. While there are plenty of opportunities to go in guns blazing, Resistance is quick to point out that you're constantly at a disadvantage. You'll need to scavenge for resources and use stealth to outmaneuver iconic machines such as the T-800. Think of it as one of the more recent Wolfenstein games, only on a far smaller scale and a much smaller budget. Still, with lots of endings to unlock, there's a fair bit of replay value to be had. Threats come in all shapes and sizes and not every situation can be solved with a well-placed long-range headshot. While Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 proved to be a misstep for developer 101st Games, sometimes a game can be on too big a scale to maintain quality throughout. Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts isn't exactly scaling things back too far. Rather than one large map, the game has broken its missions into a handful of massive sandboxes, each with a key target to hunt down and slay. Long-range sniping is still the dish of the day, and depending on the difficulty you settle on, everything from wind speed to bullet drop will affect how successful your shots are. You'll also need to use stealth to sneak into locations, as well as seeking out missions around the map to earn more cash and potentially unearth intel that might make killing your main target a little easier. Only The Last Guardian and Half-Life 3 have garnered as much fan dedicated as Shenmue 3. With everything from social media campaigns to petitions demanding that Sega finally give the sandbox martial arts simulator the threequel it deserves. And Sega finally listened, well, after a very successful Kickstarter and some considerable investment from Sony, and the game no one thought we'd ever see is finally here. And it's fine. It's very much a continuation of the series. For better and for worse. It's very in the same vein as the previous two games, with stoic hero Ryo exploring rural China as he searches for his father's killers. There are new martial arts disciplines to use, characters to meet and talk to, and all sorts of arcade-style activities to complete. Some might argue the Yakuza games perfected this formula in the interim. But Shenmue 3 still manages to infuse the mundane with the magical. It's more of a double than a triple A game in terms of looks and quality. But if you've always wanted a faithful sequel to the first two games, this will make your Christmas. If you like long cutscenes, Metal Gear Solid 4 long, then you'll really dig Death Stranding's narrative-driven experience. having had a very public break from publisher Konami following the tumultuous development and eventual launch of Metal Gear V: The Phantom Pain. Legendary Japanese developer Hideo Kojima needed a fresh start for his next project. Sony offered him a new home. And with a considerable budget, PS4 exclusivity and all the freedom he needed to be Kojima. The result has arrived, and it's certainly different. Starring the likes of Norman Reedus, Mads Mikkelsen and more, Death Stranding is all about connecting different human colonies in a post-apocalyptic version of North America. There's the occasional horror moment, and some stealth, but it's mostly a game all about carrying packages across America. It's a slow experience, but one that looks gorgeous and has some genuinely clever moments. Most Imperial forces lack force powers or lightsabers, but they can still put up a fight when they set eyes on you. Star Wars has had a rocky relationship with video games over the last few years. The Force Unleashed duology offered up near limitless force power creativity, but did so at the expense of a credible, canonical story, while EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2 had a decent if forgettable story and a vastly improved multiplayer suite completely overshadowed by a microtransaction system that barely made it into the final game. So a lot of eyes are on Titanfall and Apex Legends developer Respawn for the release of Star Wars Jedi: Fallen Order. Fallen Order offers up a single-player, story-driven experience that taps into the early years of the Empire following Order 66. With a fledgling young Jedi forced out of hiding and into a battle for his life. And the survival of the Order. Levels are non-linear, so there's a Dark Souls-esque approach to exploration and opening up new shortcuts. Combat is fast and frenetic, while force powers offer neat ways to dispatch stormtroopers, alien beasts and more. You can play the Outer Worlds like a straight shooter, or choose more tactical and diplomatic routes to success. Great sci-fi RPGs can be hard to find these days. Especially with Mass Effect having taken a giant misstep for mankind with Andromeda and the most recent Fallouts leaving something of a bad taste in the mouths of fans. But with the Outer Worlds, developer Obsidian, which previously worked on the buggy yet well-received Fallout: New Vegas, has managed to recreate the magic of exploring brand new worlds with interesting storylines and nuanced combat. While you can play it as an open-ended first-person shooter, there's simply so much more to be found. You can use the time dilation mechanic, think Fallout's VATS system, to pick key weaknesses and apply special effects. You can use companions to pull off special abilities, or apply certain flaws or statuses that directly influence everything from gunfights to dialogue. You mod and tinker with weapons. Improve your build with new perks and approach quests from almost any angle, from quiet stealth to peaceful dialogue-driven resolutions. It's a brilliant addition to the action RPG genre and a must for any PS4 owner. Medieval has already been remade once with Medieval: Resurrection on the PSP, made by the team that made the first game. The late 90s was the golden era of 3D platformers for a reason. From Banjo-Kazooie and Tomb Raider to Spyro the Dragon and Mario himself. These were the years where everyone wanted a memorable platforming mascot. SCE Studio Cambridge's answer was a one-eyed, undead knight called Sir Daniel Fortescue. Full of gallows humor and a bestiary of monstrous creatures. Medieval became something of a hit, even despite its many bugs. The 2019 Medieval is less of a remaster and more of a full-on remake with familiar levels and bosses reimagined for a new generation. Medieval is very true to the original, right down to its mechanical issues. Levels are still a challenging mixture of platforming, puzzle solving and hack-and-slash combat. Bosses are still relatively easy to cheese. You'll still rune around killing enemies so you can fill your soul-filled chalice. But there's also plenty of moments of clipping or unresponsive jump inputs. It's frustrating, but it's also very faithful to the frustration of the original. Stick with it though, because there are so many nods to the original. Special Ops is Modern Warfare's answer to zombies, offering up a tense co-op experience all about teamwork and objectives. When the original Modern Warfare trilogy wrapped up in 2011, Infinity Ward hoped to move on to bigger and better things. 2013's Ghosts proved a popular yet divisive new chapter. But the inconsistent quality and heavy sci-fi focus of 2016's Infinite Warfare saw developer Infinity Ward finally decide to return to the franchise that put it on the map. Rather than conjuring up a direct sequel, 2019's Call of Duty: Modern Warfare is a reboot of sorts. Well, a reboot that has a younger Captain Price. While this new COD does break some traditions, adding in a single-player campaign, which was missing from last year's Black Ops 4, and dropping mainstay zombies in favor of a special ops mode, first seen in Modern Warfare 2 a decade ago, that classic multiplayer formula returns. A new game engine helps introduce new mechanical features such as interactable doors and your gun being raised while sprinting. But with a fresh approach to post-launch content and progression, no paid DLC map packs and all weapons unlocked through play, and no loot crates. This could be the most accessible COD in years. Much like the first Yooka-Laylee. The Impossible Lair is full of creatively themed levels to explore. While the original Yooka-Laylee was very much an ode to the 64-bit golden age of 3D platformers, much of the team at Platonic Games are ex-Rare devs. After all, its follow-up, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, doffs its cap to the challenging levels of the Donkey Kong Country series while embracing some light RPG ideas and some creative, level-changing mechanics. The titular Impossible Lair can be accessed from the start of the game. But you'll likely die in the first few minutes. But that's okay. You're meant to fail so you can go and complete the rest of the game. Build up your repertoire of skills, and a shield made of bees. No less, and then take on the final boss run. Explore a top-down overworld, then complete fast side-scrolling levels where you down special tonics that change the look, sound and feel of the world around you. The original Grid was an attempt to take Codemaster's long history and expertise in the virtual racing world and apply it to a multi-discipline experience that could compete with the likes of Gran Turismo and Microsoft's Xbox One exclusive alternative, Forza. While its sequel lost some of that mainstream appeal by doubling down on the realistic autosport aspect. This soft reboot of the series hopes to create a more accessible racing experience that caters to both rookies and seasoned veterans. The new Grid features a huge array of racing disciplines to work your way through, covering everything from basic racing hatchbacks all the way to high-end Formula beasts. The career mode offers 6 distinct disciplines to follow, so there's plenty of replay value for those looking to maximize the time on the track. There's even a mode featuring Fernando Alonso, who served as a consultant on the game. So there's that. 2. You start off with a very basic weapon, but any piece of gear can be salvaged and used if you cut off the right limb to end a fight. While Lords of the Fallen, Deck 13 Interactive's first swing at a proper action RPG, tried to emulate Dark Souls formula and dark fantasy aesthetic a little too closely. It hit upon something a little more original with 2017's The Surge, swapping castles and knights for futuristic factories and cyborgs. This new IP used limb targeting and the ability to repurpose enemy weapons and armor to upgrade your own character. The Surge 2 doesn't rewrite this formula. Instead, it simply enhances your options with builds, i.e., classes, a more diverse enemy roster and, of course, far more options when it comes to customization. With a more diverse setting in Jericho City, you can now explore and unlock new shortcuts, making each new run that little bit easier. Combat is still challenging, but you can augment your character to give on-screen prompts to help with parrying and blocking. There are also far more builds to choose from, so you can design a class that suits your particular playstyle. And with more enemies than ever, you can loot, craft and upgrade with new armor pieces and weapons. With the regular football season already in full swing here in the UK, the imminent arrival of a new FIFA looms on the horizon. FIFA 20 doesn't bring too many major changes to gameplay, bar improvements to AI-controlled players that enhance the flow of play. But it does introduce a new mode known as Volta Football. Designed as a callback to the days of FIFA Street, Volta offers 17 locations around the world for some high-intensity 11v11 action, with narrative elements akin to the now completed The Journey storyline. Volta takes many of the elements that make World of Kel in the NHL series so popular: character customization, timed events and creative stadium designs, and gives it a fuzzball FIFA Street-esque spin. Elsewhere, the manager side of career mode has been updated to include more player agency. And there's a couple of new modes in FUT. Borderlands 3 doesn't try to break its own mold, but it does offer a fun if messy co-op shooter experience. The original Borderlands offered something very different back in 2009. Splicing together the constant allure of loot with a cooperative first-person shooter. Jump ahead by a decade and that formula has become a very familiar sight. So what does Borderlands 3 offer to make itself stand apart? Well, not very much. But that's clearly by design. Borderlands 3 preserves its own systems and mechanics in Amber, offering the same open-world environments and the same ever-flowing font of enemies to kill and guns to collect. Much like Borderlands 2, entry number 3 simply increases the scale at which you shoot and collect things. You'll now explore a more diverse set of new worlds, offering a stark change from the drab canyon locales of the original game. Missions are also far more varied than Go Here. Kill This instructions. The game's humor, something the series has sometimes nailed, and other times failed to pull off, is also a stronger this time around. It's puerile, yes, but actually funny in places for once. As before, you play through the whole thing in single player. Play locally in co-op or hook up with your friends, match-made strangers online. Playing as a squad is always the best way to enjoy Borderlands. Although at launch BL3 does have some issues with slowdown when playing online. Especially when in a gunfight with a little too many enemies. It's not consistent, but enough of an issue for Gearbox to look into. While NBA 2K20 is running on quite an old engine. Visual Concepts is still pushing out some impressive graphics. One of the best, if not the best, annual sports simulators on the planet is back. Bringing with it a set of small yet very impactful changes to the flow of play. NBA 2K20 has now placed greater focus on realistic traits between positions. So smaller players are now faster, while larger players are more dominant physically. The road to 99 is now shorter as a result. With less of a grind to earn VC. As developer Visual Concepts wants players to invest in multiple builds geared towards key positions and roles. Microtransactions are there, but progression no longer feels quite as choked by them. The neighborhood social hub has a new layout, while Creme supports a welcome 3v3 mode. MXGP 2019 has an improved compound, now known as the Playground, and it's full of activities and things to do. Italian developer Milestone Team has been mucking about in the racing simulation genre for years now. And one of the series it's improved upon the most is the mud-kicking world of MXGP. The big jumps, slides and spectacular crashes of motocross translate very well to video games. And MXGP 2019 continues the franchise's combination of arcade handling and realistic bike rider physics. MXGP 2019 also sees some of the biggest changes to the series since the series moved to the Unreal Engine for MXGP 3. Namely in the inclusion of a new sandbox playground hub, think the hub from Descenders or the neighborhood from the recent NBA 2K games. New modes aim to add a little more fun to the realism, Waypoint looks like a great addition, and, finally, an actual track editor to build your own mud-caked courses to share online. Control takes the gunplay of Max Payne and combines it with the reality-bending ideas of Alan Wake and Quantum Break. Remedy Entertainment certainly has ambition. It managed to take the bullet time concept of The Matrix and applied it to a gritty tale of vengeance in Max Payne. Explored new narrative techniques with a horror twist in Alex Wake and successfully combined a TV show and a game with Quantum Break. So, naturally, its latest game combines elements of all three. Control puts you in the newly appointed boots of Jesse Fadden, an agent for the Federal Bureau of Control, a secret government agency created to monitor and control paranormal activity. Locked in the oldest house HQ in New York, things go awry and Jess must learn to manifest her powers and survive the threat of an entity known as the Hiss. Having developed the Darksiders series for the better part of a decade, including last year's underrated Darksiders 3, Gunfire Games is finally ready to launch its first proper new IP. Remnant, from the ashes breaks from the studio's previous mold. embracing a cooperative survival shooter model that'll be instantly familiar to anyone that's played the Division series. Unlike the Tom Clancy games, Remnant is more of a fantastical take on the post-apocalypse, where a nightmare from another dimension has ravaged the Earth. Multiple locations both on our home planet and in other realms offer lots of diverse open maps to explore for loot and gear, with XP leveling and giant bosses to fight. As with anything even loosely based on H.P. Lovecraft's work, The Sinking City leans heavily on the effects of insanity, having cut its teeth for many years on the most recent Sherlock Holmes games, including the buggy yet enjoyable Crimes and Punishments and The Devil's Daughter. Developer Frogwares has taken that familiar detective structure and applied to even gothier setting, taking cues from the works of H.P. Lovecraft. The Ukrainian studio steers things towards more of an unsettling horror direction, rather than self-contained levels. The Sinking City takes an open-world approach, with your trusty boat enabling you to visit all manner of isolated areas. Your sanity can become frayed if you witness too many horrific sights, so you'll need to marshal your nerves as you attempt to solve the mystery of the city that's been claimed by the waves. There are 6 different factions to choose from at launch, and each one differs wildly with its unit designs and abilities. There are strategy games, and then there are 4X strategy games, with the grand-scale battles and continent-sized webs of politics, intrigue and diplomacy. The latest installment in the Age of Wonders series, Age of Wonders Planetfall, moves the action to a sci-fi-inspired future that aims to follow in publisher Paradox Interactive's own heritage with the brilliant Europa Universalis series. Using a procedurally generated map, you'll start out with the choice of 6 factions at launch, each with their own unique history, units and tactical preferences. You can explore planets, exploit multiple biomes for resources, broker trade deals and even declare all-out war. You can build interstellar navy fleets and even engineer your own doomsday weapons. Being able to play as 10 officially licensed teams from the college level will definitely appeal to hardcore gridiron fans. It's that time of year where all the big sports simulators start to return, complete with new lineups, refreshed cover stars and updated content. The first one out of the tunnel and into the arena is Madden NFL 20. EA's unrivaled gridiron sim. All the classic modes such as Franchise and Madden Ultimate Team all return, with the story mode now replaced with a brand new experience. Face of the franchise QB1 replaces the long shot, utilizing a structure similar to Superstar mode, last seen in Madden NFL 06, where you'll take a personalized quarterback from college level to the NFL. 10 licensed college teams will feature, with plenty of famous faces thrown in for good measure. A new Superstar X Factor system is also in effect, enabling you to utilize key abilities for some of the league's biggest playmakers. Adding in proper co-op for the first time really makes a difference, especially with Youngblood's more open-ended level design. Ever since Bethesda revived the Wolfenstein franchise in 2014 with the New Order, we've been treated to an increasingly violent and equally creative shooter series that's always finding new ways to kill Nazis in its alt history setting. The third full entry in this modern reimagining is set in the 80s, in a timeline where the Third Reich used advanced technology to win WW2, clearly influenced by one of Bethesda's other popular series, Dishonored. Wolfenstein: Youngblood marks something of a departure. Firstly, you can play through the entire campaign in co-op, opening up all manner of tactical opportunities. Secondly, with a base of operations as your central hub, you'll now be able to tackle missions with more freedom. Oh, and it's got a killer synthwave soundtrack. You can execute enemies in a variety of grisly ways, with the enhanced edition adding in even more gruesome moves. While the niche for games such as Redeemer, Enhanced Edition is quite specific, i.e. those looking for an uncomplicated top-down experience that gets its kicks by getting creative with violence, it does scratch that itch with gusto. In Redeemer, you play Vasily, a former Russian merc who finds his attempts to build a new life as a peaceful monk ruined by his past life. Like every great 80s gruff action hero, Vasily is a man with a set of skills that turn him into a cross between Kratos and Rambo. Whether with your bare hands, with a hammer or with a variety of firearms, Redeemer Enhanced Edition doesn't complicate things with too much exposition. It simply lets you loose with deadly intent. With the ability to dispatch enemies with quiet assassinations, messy executions, and more. You can even disarm your opponents, quite literally in some cases, thanks to a handy parry system. Support for local co-op has been added in, as has a new perk system and more ways to bludgeon your foes to jam. Being able to play cooperatively with up to 3 other players makes questing and building 3 times more fun. Like most things from Japan based on a series that's infinitely more popular in the East than it is in the West. It took the original Dragon Quest builders just under a year to make it to the West. It was worth it though, because the mix of Dragon Quest themed RPG questing and Minecraft-esque building really worked. Now its sequel is ready to launch on over here on PS4 and Switch, and it's even bigger, bolder, and more expansive than ever. Unlike the previous entry, DQB2 is now fully cooperative with support for both offline and online multiplayer with up to 3 other players. Being able to explore its much larger open world, which is filled with tons of new regions, each with its own specific items for mining and crafting, with friends makes all the difference. You can even swim and fly now, which makes navigating terrain so much more enjoyable. There's a great focus on growing and harvesting this time around, with the option to help till soil and nurture crops for better yields. And when you're not supporting villages and towns with food, you'll be out and about fighting lots of familiar DQ monsters. If you're playing solo, you'll also have the mysterious Malroth keeping you company on your quests. Overall, it's an improvement on the original in almost every way, and a fine alternative to Minecraft and the like. The latest addition to Final Fantasy's online iteration is jam-packed with new content, including new jobs and locations. While Final Fantasy XV was the last major installment in the franchise bar the FFVII remake that seems destined to remain in development forever, Final Fantasy XIV continues to improve itself with new updates. Much like The Elder Scrolls Online, this MMO has steadily built up a dedicated following, and its latest expansion, Shadowbringers, delivers its fans a raft of new locations, enemies, and other fresh additions. You can now play as a new race, the Viera, take on a new job, including the Gunbreaker, and explore plenty of fresh locations, such as Hirakaka Greatwood, AMH Arang, and Il Mheg. You can play through the entire Shadowbringers story solo, alongside some classic FF characters, or do the whole thing as a squad of players. Judgment is still set in the Yakuza universe, so expect to run into a few familiar faces along the way. With the story of Yakuza deftly brought to a close in Yakuza 6, the Song of Life 3 years ago, well, in Japan at least, developer Ruga Gotoku Studio has been hard at work on a new title that fits into the same universe while trying to offer something a little different. And by that we mean it's basically another Yakuza game, only without main hero Kiryu and some additional mechanics focused on detective work. While the attempts to weave in more of a procedural crime noir feel doesn't always work, those sleuthing and suspect pursuit systems never feel natural, but Judgment does a fine job of updating the combat model of Yakuza 6 to make this the most satisfying entry in the series to date. Kamuriko has never looked better, and Pai Takayuki Yagami makes for an interesting lead. Judgment also sees a full English dub included alongside the native Japanese voice track. It might not have the magical quality of Mario Kart, but Center is still a fun and enjoyable kart racer that's still a riot to play. Gamers love a bit of nostalgia, especially when those memories of yore are brought up to date with modern visuals and mechanics. So with Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy and Spyro Reignited Trilogy proving such a hit with fans, Activision is keeping to the same formula with a contemporary remake of classic PS1 racer, Crash Team Racing. It's no great invention of the silly arcade racer. You'll still power slide around tracks filled with dinosaurs, lava flows, and more. You'll collect Wumpa fruit and smash through crates just like those 32-bit glory days. This version supports online multiplayer, and includes extra karts and tracks from the PS2 era Crash Nitro Kart. Want one of the most realistic virtual racing experiences out there? This is the high-speed sim for you. Italian developer Milestone has become the go-to studio for two-wheeled motorsport simulators. And with the latest Monster Energy Supercross game already under its belt, it's returned to the tarmac for the annual entry in the MotoGP series. MotoGP 19 brings with it a slew of new features alongside improved racing physics and all the latest riders and tracks from across multiple race types. This year's incarnation comes with a new mode that recreates some of the most memorable moments and legends from Moto's past, including more than 50 legendary riders, over 35 bikes and 3 additional historical tracks. And that's alongside all the modern-era content as well. Add the option to play as a race director in multiplayer and you've got one much improved racing sim. Skyrim's dragons became one of its most beloved highlights. So can Elsewhere live up to that legacy. While we'll probably be waiting a considerable amount of time before we even see a proper glimpse of the Elder Scrolls 6. ZeniMax Studios has been confidently keeping the ESO fires burning with its long-running MMO. The third and latest mega expansion, The Elder Scrolls Online, Elsewhere, introduces the land of the Khajiit, a location not visited by the series since 94's Arena, and finally brings dragons back into the mix. Those talking winged beasts were one Skyrim's most memorable highlights. So expect to battle plenty of them as you undertake over 30 hours of new quests and gameplay. There's the introduction of the highly anticipated Necromancer class as well as new large-scale Dragon Attack World events to bring the community together. You'll travel across a variety of locales in war-torn France, each filled with dangers to avoid and characters to meet. Set in medieval France during the 100 Years' War, A Plague Tale: Innocence is a story-driven adventure that's not afraid to show the realities of life amid war, sickness and persecution. You'll step into the shoes of Amica, a nobleman's daughter who feels with her sick brother in tow while the Inquisition chases them into the heart of rural France. Amica isn't particularly savvy in combat to begin with, so you'll switch between using your sling to distract enemies, knock them out, or use hordes or ravenous rats to take them out. These hungry rodents move like waves and will kill anything in sight, leading to some tense uses of fire and light in the darkest of caverns and crypts. With stealth and environmental puzzles aplenty, A Plague Tale offers an unexpectedly satisfying journey into the past. There are less playable characters than Transformed, but there are a lot of brilliant Sonic-themed tracks to make up for it. When Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed dropped in 2012, British studio Sumo Digital took its promising work with Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing and built a solid kart racer that felt both familiar to Mario Kart fans and refreshingly different. 6.5 years on and the transforming vehicles are gone. But in the place is a racer that doubles down on the smoothness of its driving model. Team Sonic Racing, as the name suggests, places an onus on working together with your team. Whether you're playing solo with, against the AI, or in online, local races, you'll team up to increase one another's boost, protect teammates, or unleash powers that will send your competitors flying. A fine return to form for the hedgehog that's got to go fast. You can use a variety of crazy vehicles to traverse the dystopian open world of Rage 2, including a zippy little hover bike. The original Rage was set to inherit the mantle of Doom and Wolfenstein, but id Software's open-world shooter, despite a technically impressive game engine and some suitably atmospheric environments, ended up being quite underwhelming back in 2011. So for its unexpected sequel, it has teamed up with Just Cause and Mad Max developer Avalanche to create a first-person shooter that does away with the post-apocalyptic seriousness and embraces a more slapstick approach to its shooter violence. You can upgrade a series of augmented powers, such as the ability to create blast enemies into the air and power slam into the ground, and combine them with a variety of overpowered weapons, including the deadly wingstick. Think of a frisbee, but it's made of knives, as well as a Doom-level loud combat shotgun. Some old friends and locations from the first game remain present, such as Dr. Antonin Caviezer and the town of Wellspring. And the ludicrous kill box that is Mutant Bash TV also returns. Rage 2 is more akin to Bulletstorm and Borderlands than the original Rage, with the game constantly empowering you to charge in and try to cause as much mayhem and carnage as possible, rather than play slow and safe to stay alive. And after we think that's no bad thing. When it comes to Sony's exclusive properties, Everybody's Golf is a perfect fit for PSVR's immersion. Rather than proving itself to be a passing fad, virtual reality has quietly been improving on itself with enhanced hardware and even more ambitious games. The PSVR continues to be one of the most popular commercial platforms. And Sony isn't going to abandon like it did PS Vita. Its latest first-party release, Everybody's Golf VR, looks to take the family-friendly series and immerse you in its club-swinging action like never before. You can use your PS Move controller like a club, so you can take full swings down the fairway and tap the ball into the hole when putting on the green. There are 3 full courses to explore, a driving range for perfecting your swing, and there's even an interactive caddy that will accompany you around as you play. Frackers will hunt you, in small groups and in giant hordes. But you'll also drive them out by destroying their nests. Sony has been really hitting it out of the park with its recent run of PS4 exclusives. And it's hoping Days Gone will keep that trend going. And while the story of Deacon Street, John, a grizzled biker living in a world ravaged by a zombie-like infection, doesn't quite live up to the likes of God of War or Detroit Become Human, its take on the post-apocalyptic open world is definitely worth playing. Your trusty motorcycle works much like your equally trusty steed in Red Dead Redemption 2. So you'll need to look after it and keep it in good working order if you want it to perform when you need it to. So that means looking for scrap to perform repairs and fuel to keep your tank filled to the brim. You can use stealth to your advantage, using lures to send hordes of frackers to attack human enemies. Or you can go all out and blow heads off with shotguns. It's easy to become overwhelmed, but that sense of desperation is part of Days Gone's tragic charm. The same facial animation tech used for Injustice 2 returns for MK11, making for some incredible character models. Mortal Kombat X was a big step forward for the gore-loving Western fighter series. But in between, developer NetherRealm Studios produced the brilliant Injustice 2, and it's this entry that's had a huge impact on Mortal Kombat 11. Alongside the different variants that affect your moveset and playstyle, you can now customize your character with different costume pieces so you can build your very own take on Scorpion or Raiden. Alongside these improved and added systems, there's an elaborate single-player storyline spanning the entire MK saga, including revisiting classic versions of the cast, a robust online mode, and tons of daily ladders and challenges to keep you playing each day. And with lots of special characters likely to be added with DLC over the next year, there's plenty of reason to test your might in 2020. Ghost Giant has all the charm and colorful sense of character you'd expect from a Zoink Games production. Swedish studio Zoink Games is fast becoming one of the most exciting developers on the indie scene. When it's not making intuitive platformers chock full of irreverent humor, flipping death. Stick it to the man, it's building ethereal worlds full of secrets and interactive storytelling. Faye. Its latest project continues that unpredictable creative trend with Ghost Giant, a VR-focused affair all about a little boy and his friendship with a, you guessed it, ghost giant. As the titular big fella, Ghost Giant enables you to interact with its world almost like a series of dioramas. You can open up houses in full 3D, look inside to see what its occupants are up to, and solve puzzles therein. As the invisible friend to a well-meaning but easily victimized little boy, Louis, you'll soon form a bond with your tiny pal as help affect the world around him. Beautifully designed and full to the brim with charm, Ghost Giant is a PSVR must-have. It's not just the visuals that have been upgraded for the remaster. Some key systems, such as crafting, have been overhauled. It's been 6.5 years since Ubisoft attempted to move the Assassin's Creed series beyond franchise star Ezio. And while the series has gone on to bigger and better things, including the open ocean piracy of Black Flag only a year later, ACIII remains a bold if flawed entry. Thankfully, Ubisoft has given this tale a new lease of life with Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered. This new version upgrades the visuals with a new lighting model that gives the fledgling United States an even more captivating look than the originals. while a handful of quality of life improvements, such as enabling access to certain weapons via crafting, helps elevate this remaster above the previous iterations. It might seem a little creaky compared to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but it's still got plenty to offer. Most survival games pit you against zombies or monsters, but not left alive. This game forces you to fight off mechs. Of all things, bringing together some legendary names from Japanese video game development and anime, including Toshifumi Nabeshima, director. Armored Core series. Yoji Shinkawa from Kojima Productions, character designer. Metal Gear Solid series. And Takayuki Yanis, mech designer. Ghost in the Shell, Arise. Mobile Suit Gundam 00. Xenoblade Chronicles X, Left Alive attempts to combine the stealth of Metal Gear with the giant mech combat of the Armored Core series. There are 3 characters to choose from, each with their own branching storylines. So there's plenty of narrative to make your way through, and with a mixture of stealth and third-person gunfights. You'll get a healthy mix of action when you're battling armored troops and even angrier mechs. Kills are all about well-timed executions, channeling that classic Souls trope of earning every victory. Following the excellent Bloodborne and the equally thrilling Dark Souls 3 was always going to be a challenge. But Japanese developer, much like its hardcore fanbase, rarely backs down from a challenge. The result is Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. A confident step forward for the studio that blends some of the elements it's made a name for itself with, while adding in new mechanics and ideas that take those familiar ingredients in a welcome new direction, rather than building a character like a traditional action RPG. Sekiro eschews these leveling systems in favor of a greater focus on combat and exploration. Battles are now all about wearing your opponent down before striking a killing blow, making it more akin to the combat system of For Honor than Dark Souls. There's the option to stealth entire areas, and a grappling hook on your prosthetic arm enables you to scale buildings in seconds. With the current console generation now approaching its twilight years, fighting game fans are spoilt for choice when it comes to both 2D and 3D fighters. The Dead or Alive series has been around for a long time, and while it spends a little too much time kitting out its female, and male, but mostly female, roster in revealing outfits, the fighting model itself is solid. Dead or Alive 6 doesn't stray too far from this formula, but adds in just enough new modes to keep things fresh. There's a decent story mode to sink your teeth into, and while it's nothing on the likes of Injustice 2, it does help give each major character a little time in the limelight. There's also a whole host of training modes, which are incredibly helpful to newer players hoping to refine the skills before heading online. Gameplay-wise, the biggest change is the focus on escape moves that help break combos and stop one-sided affairs, which makes a huge difference when playing online. Just watch out for the expensive DLC and season passes. Despite delays and a fair few technical problems, Tom Clancy's The Division nevertheless offered a robust take on the online shooter RPG model, combining cover shooting, loot, PvE missions and PvP arenas into one giant package. The Division 2 takes this same formula, moves the action from Manhattan to Washington, D.C. and makes enough important changes to elevate this well above the first game. Loot is now far more numerous, and missions offer a little more variety to the structure and storytelling. You're still fighting gangs of marauders, murderers and thieves, but with a brand new location that offers far more diverse environments. The Division 2 plays like a step in the right direction for the series. Co-op is a big focus, with support items, such as drones that heal teammates and portal gun turrets you can manual assign targets, helping transform you into a crack unit of agents. It's been a while since we last saw the Devil May Cry series dust off its pistols and try for that coveted S rank. In 2013, the series had something of a reboot with DMC, Devil May Cry, with demon-slaying hero Dante getting a makeover and a foul mouth for his troubles. Devil May Cry 5 sees development duties brought back in-house to Capcom, with veteran director Hideaki Itsuno returning to the franchise and DMC seemingly now existing as an experimental spin-off than a full entry in the series. But Capcom hasn't waited on its laurels in the intervening years, and DMC 5 looks set to be the most exciting entry in years. For a start, it looks incredible. Itsuno and his team have aimed for a hyper-realistic aesthetic, even going as far as to have fabric scanned in order to recreate every texture in the world. Expect brothers, allies, enemies Dante and Nero to unleash mayhem with their mix of acrobatic gunfights, melee kills and over-the-top powers. Considering how well Resident Evil has been revived in recent years, we have high hopes for DMC's future. Trials Rising will feature plenty of post-launch content in the form of new tracks and customization items. It's been almost 5 years since the last time Trials crashed its way into our hearts. And developer Redlinks has spent that time making one of the best entries in the series yet. While it's no grand reinvention of the classic formula, Trials Rising ticks the right boxes in almost every area. There are countless tracks to compete on, which gradually increase in difficulty and complexity, as well as a ton of customization options as you level up and earn loot crates. You can compete online with other like-minded players, compete in skill and trick-based tournaments, and even create your party games locally. The track editor also returns, enabling you to build your very own courses, however crazy your ideas might be, then share them online for players across multiple platforms to enjoy. With the next Dragon Age deep in development and Mass Effect taking a step back after the commercial and critical failure of Andromeda, developer BioWare is taking its experience with building rich RPG worlds and applying it to the world of MMO online shooters. The result is Anthem, a cross between Destiny's cooperative battles and Warframe's third-person gunplay, melee action. With a rich world to explore, with unique weather cycles that terraform the topography periodically. Tons of loot to collect. And all the customization you could want for your Javelin. Anthem is set to be one of 2019's most important releases. The flying mechanic alone are worth the price of admission. It's only been a year since Far Cry 5 gave us a grand open world in the form of Hope County's bombastic playground. But the series is back once more with a sequel set 17 after one of that game's post-apocalyptic endings. The land has now been reclaimed nature. And with a small community to protect, you'll be going up against a gang of neon-loving marauders known as the Highwaymen. Don't expect any grand changes to the formula with Far Cry New Dawn, but do expect a slightly smaller map and a streamlined approach to crafting and combat. You'll still fight to control outposts, but you can now salvage them, lose them to your enemies, then reclaim them for more resources. New expeditions missions offer trips outside Hope County, while the option to craft new makeshift weapons plays perfectly into its Mad Max-esque aesthetic. The third title in the Metro series of video games, Exodus, sees you leave the city of Moscow to travel across post-apocalyptic Russia. The Metro series of games returns with a brand new, far more expansive third title in Exodus, which sees the player break free of the claustrophobic confines of ruined Moscow and its labyrinthine metro system and venture out into the wilds of post-apocalyptic Russia. This broadening of its scope, though, hasn't changed what made the first two Metro game FPS delights. With the immersive survival and RPG aspects like maintaining and customizing your weapons and gear, as well as undertaking realistic actions like wiping condensation and detritus from your gas mask's viewing window and changing its filter. Still very much in residence. These small, atmosphere-building details, when combined with a bombastic combat system where gunplay feels natural and very deadly, make every mission or exploration genuinely engaging. While the fact that the game comes loaded with multiple different endings means that the player genuinely gets the finale they deserve. The first properly good FPS of 2019, Metro Exodus is without doubt one of the best PS4 games you can currently play on Sony's generation-winning console hardware. It's taken so long to arrive we were half expecting it to never come out. But Square Enix has finally made good on its promise to round off the long-running Kingdom Hearts series with a full-on current-gen extravaganza. Kingdom Hearts 3 continues the series' love of combining long-winded storylines with much-loved Disney characters, with everyone from the cast of Toy Story to the chilly crew from Frozen getting a look in. Expect more hack-and-slash combat, but with a refined battle system and some of the biggest sandbox levels yet. Packed with secrets, Disney lore galore, and enough collectibles to keep you searching for months to come. Kingdom Hearts 3 is the top-form successor to KH2 we've all been waiting for. Resident Evil 2 is more than just a remake, it's a classic story and setting combined with all the improvements that followed it. Survival horror has plenty of classics to its name, but few hold as much significance to fans and critics alike as the original Resident Evil games. Resident Evil 2, which originally launched in 1998, is still considered one of the best because it nailed the right mix of action, horror, exploration and puzzles. Turn the clock forwards to 2019 and Capcom has completely remade that milestone in gaming. With every part of Raccoon City remade with modern visuals and mechanical improvements in mind. Those fixed camera angles are gone, with a RE4 style over-the-shoulder view making all the difference. And some top-notch lighting upping the nightmarish atmosphere. It's been a long time since the last proper installment in Bandai Namco's long-running fighter plane series. And while the intervening years saw the franchise ere towards arcade dogfights, Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown manages to bridge the gap between the two. The result is an exhilarating exercise in simulated flying, intense aerial fights and the clever use of dynamic clouds as cover, along with support for multiplayer modes, and a zeitgeisty battle royale mode. The PS4 PS Pro versions also support PSVR. You can't play the whole game in VR, but there are some select missions that will test how good you are at fighting motion sickness and enemy planes. It might be 10 years old, but TOV is still a classic JRPG that's as fresh as the day it originally released. The Tales series has been around since the SNES. And for more than 20 years it's produced some of the best JRPGs to ever grace the genre. Tales of Vesperia, originally released on Xbox 360 in the West back in 2008, is one such example, and Bandai Namco is celebrating its 10th anniversary with a nice definitive edition. This version includes updated visuals, an enhanced soundtrack and all the costumes and extra content that was previously exclusive to the Japanese PS3 version. If you loved it the first time round, or you're brand new to the series, this is a must-play addition to your collection. Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom perfectly balances nostalgia and modern improvements in one gorgeous package. Serving as a spiritual successor to the Wonder Boy games, a series of platformers that combined open-ended exploration with challenging combat and a variety of magical creatures to transform into, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom offers 6 different forms to take and over 15 hours of gameplay to enjoy. With hand-drawn animations that give every scene a magical anime aesthetic, and a soundtrack written by legendary Japanese composers Yuzo Koshiro, Motoi Sakuraba, Mikuru Yaman, Kiki Kobayashi and Takeshi Yanagawa. If you enjoyed Wonder Boy, The Dragon's Trap, you'll love this. The Yakuza series has been going since the days of PlayStation 2. And after 3 console generations, the Japanese RPG brawler is finally ready to bring its story to a close. Set in modern-day Japan, the 6th numbered entry in the franchise doubles down on everything that's made the previous entries so much fun, including its arcade combat, silly side activities and enough side quests to keep you playing well into 2019. It's also a really good place to jump into the series for newcomers. But if you're a seasoned member of the Yakuza family, you'll find this a fine swansong to a series that's spiritually succeeded Shenmue for over a decade. There's been plenty of memorable races this year, but while everyone has gone crazy for the likes of Forza Horizon 4, there's been a few titles virtual petrolheads shouldn't overlook. Onrush, which comes from a studio formerly known as Evolution Studios, it of MotorStorm fame. Onrush takes the cooperative nature of a hero shooter and throws it into an off-road racing setup, where certain abilities can help heal your teammates or give them a speed boost. With a ton of modes and rule sets, a near-endless amount of vehicle customization and a slew of tracks to chew up, Onrush is one of the most underrated games of year. Following a long hiatus, the Valkyria Chronicles series returns with one of its strongest installments yet. With its alternative history take on World War II, where fictitious nations battle for control of the continent of Europa, the Valkyria Chronicles series has always set itself apart with its Western military aesthetic and anime character designs. and it continues that trend with aplomb in Valkyria Chronicles 4. With a snow-swept new setting, a brand new soldier type in the form of the Grenadier, and a new Brave system, which enables you to use downed squad mates to inspire others to greater deeds. The franchise continues to prove that tactical battles and RPG mechanics can work in harmony. Over the last few years, the WWE 2K series has taken plenty of cues from the NBA 2K games with more of a simulated approach to its wrestling action. Well, developers Ukes and Visual Concepts have listened to fan feedback and decided to return to a more arcadey setup that leads to faster and more fun matches. That shift in gameplay pace is joined by the return of Showcase Mode, which follows the WWE history of Daniel Bryan through some of his most famous rivalries. There's also the return of the faction-driven Road to Glory mode and new Mortal Kombat-style towers. Easily the most accessible entry in the franchise in years. You can switch between the new soundtrack and Stuart Copeland's whimsical originals at the touch of a button, with Sony presumably tinkering away behind closed doors on what will likely one day reveal itself as the PS5. The platform holder has been digging through its exclusivity archive and remaking some of the classics from the PS1 heyday. First it was Crash Bandicoot, Insane Trilogy. And now we've Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Toys for Bob, one of the studios that gave Spyro some short-lived new relevance in the Skylanders series, has remade all three of the original PS1 games with a faithful recreation of every world, hub, enemy and mini-game. There's even a brand new soundtrack based on Stuart Copeland's brilliant original scores. A perfect treat to warm you up this Christmas. The NHL series, of all of EA's long-running sports franchises, holds one of the best track records for quality. But that means it does occasionally struggle to outdo itself and truly innovate. Thankfully, NHL 19 manages to take the series forwards with some new enhancements to on-field play that make every check, turn and swipe of the puck that bit more realistic. There's also a new World of Kell system, which uses something as simple as a persistent XP system to track your progress across multiple modes. So every game feels like it's part of a connected whole. Call of Duty, WW2 wound back the clock last year. And now AR&DICE's Grand Shooter series is doing the same, returning to its roots for a full-scale FPS experience that doesn't hold back, featuring some of the biggest and the most creative maps in the franchise. Multiplayer boasts plenty of modes, including the multi-tiered Grand Operations. There's even a single-player campaign for those that sorely missed it in this year's Black Ops 4. There's also an upcoming content schedule, including new maps, new modes, new weapons and vehicles, and a Battle Royale mode that's set to launch in March 2019. Did we mention all DLC is free to every player? Red Dead Redemption 2 is actually a prequel to the original Red Dead and ties into it in multiple ways. Much like Grand Theft Auto 5 before it, Rockstar's latest opus, the Wild West set Red Dead Redemption 2 is a landmark in modern gaming. 8 years of development has produced an open world filled with some of the best writing you'll play this generation, from the main story to dynamic encounters littered across its plains, swamps, mountains and deserts. You can duel fellow gunslingers, break in and bond with wild horses, hunt some legendary animals in the wild, and follow a narrative that shows a United States in a state of transformation as the Old West, and the outlaw life, finds itself about to be swallowed by the arrival of the modern era. It's an incredible piece of art, and a game you simply have to own on PS4 or PS4 Pro, with a terrifyingly huge of options to choose from. Every playthrough offers a new way to off your targets. Back in 2016, IO Interactive took the sandbox assassination sim that was Hitman and breathed new life into its classic formula. Here and now the much-anticipated sequel takes the elements that made the first Hitman such a success, huge levels to explore, filled with myriad ways to kill a specific target, and simply turns the dial to 11. Rather than releasing the game episodically as it did with the first game, IO Interactive is releasing Hitman 2 as a full game alongside Hitman Sniper Assassin 2 and the first of its timed elusive targets, played by none other than Sean Bean. Fallout 76 isn't a single-player game like Fallout 4, but an online world much like The Elder Scrolls Online. A lot of detractors thought the fantasy RPG lore of The Elder Scrolls couldn't work as an online experience. And then along came The Elder Scrolls Online with its vast worlds and co-op gameplay. Now Fallout 76 is here, and it's ready to do the same thing for the irradiated plains of West Virginia. You can party up on a server and play with friends. Or go it alone, with a huge array of quests to undertake and complete, gear to collect, and all manner of mutant monsters to evade, destroy, loot. Classic mechanics such as the VATS targeting system and the special progression setup all return. Although they've been tweaked to fit an always online experience. God of War brings the character of Kratos out of his PS2 roots and gives him a three-dimensional story that elevates him as a result. Having killed every last deity and godly creature on Mount Olympus, the walking mountain of muscle and rage known as Kratos wrapped up the original God of War trilogy in a pool of blood and satisfaction. So where to go next? To the halls of Norse mythology, of course. With a new beard and a new sun in tow. The end result is God of War reimagined with a new combat model. A lavishly designed semi-open world and a story that's not afraid to pull on the heartstrings while you're killing monsters and the like. It also looks absolutely stunning on PS4 Pro, acting as a technical showcase for just what Sony's pixel-pushing powerhouse console can do. The superlative traditional RPG adventure comes to PS4 in the form of Divinity: Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition. A remarkably good console port that retains everything that made the PC original an out-and-out hit. Fans of those classic RPGs from the 1990s, such as Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, and Planescape Torment will immediately feel right at home in Divinity 2. With a detailed character creator, immersive world and narrative, interesting companions, complex and deep tactical combat system, and unsurpassed freedom to learn what skills you want and to go where you want. 2. With thousands of small improvements and enhancements. This edition of Divinity: Original Sin 2 is truly definitive, and a must-play for anyone with an interest in the RPG genre. It's been a long time since Marvel has had a video game that's achieved the popularity and acclaim that DC has enjoyed for years thanks to the Batman Arkham series. Well, that's all changed thanks to Ratchet & Clank developer Insomniac Games, which has given everyone's favorite webhead an open-world adventure that encapsulates his powers and taps into the comics' classic lore to create something new, fresh and exciting. With Uncharted: The Lost Legacy proving that Naughty Dog's treasure hunting series was far from retirement age. It's up to Crystal Dynamics, and new series main developer, Eidos Montreal, to step up and prove Lara Croft still has what it takes to show Nate, Chloe and co. who the real Tomb Raider is. Thankfully, Shadow of the Tomb Raider more than raises the bar, with some of the biggest set pieces, elaborate tomb designs and some of the biggest sandbox hubs ever. Combat is now more geared towards hunting and stealth, enabling Lara and you to feel like a true predator when you're not hunting for relics in dusty old temples. It's a little too bleak in places, and a lot of character development falls flat, but it's still a strong way to see out Crofty's origin trilogy. The latest Call of Duty aims to shed the series' increasing irrelevancy by actively incorporating modes and mechanics from the likes of Overwatch and PUBG. The result is an online-focused shooter that's wholly unoriginal, but far more engaging and rewarding as a result. Blackout: COD's answer to the big battle royale craze, is a slick take on the genre. With a giant map and all the gun variants you could ask for. Multiplayer is now more team-focused with no regenerative health and improved specialist abilities. And Zombies is packed with content, all of which is as fun and crazy as you could imagine. While the series seems like it's going back to a damaging annual cycle again, it isn't. With Ubisoft confirming the series will take another year off in 2019. You'd never know it thanks to the ambition and execution of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, offering one of the biggest maps the series has ever boasted. This ancient Greece-set adventure throws in almost every popular feature from the last few years. The improved combat of Assassin's Creed Origins returns, as well as a renewed focus on RPG mechanics. It can make the game a little grindy in places, but with some brilliant boss fights, a return to open sea sailing and some great storytelling. Its proof AC is far from over the hill. It's been 6 years since the previous entry in the series. But while it's taken its time to reach current-gen hardware, Soul Calibur V brings with it the best entry in the sword-swinging franchise since SCII. The change of engine makes for a slick and responsive combat model, while the inclusion of 2 huge story modes will ensure this fighting title becomes a serious time sink. While locking fan-favorite fighters behind DLC is a backwards approach to post-launch content, the inclusion of Geralt of Rivia as a special guest character is a fine addition. The netcode is rock solid and there's all the customization options you could possibly want. The stunning open-world epic that is Red Dead Redemption 2 is a must-play on PlayStation 4. It looks superb on PS4 Pro. 2. We're guessing you're already very familiar with Red Dead Redemption 2 review hype, with the game receiving perfect scores across the board. But it truly is an experience not to be missed. So much time and money was poured into this game that, if it was anyone but Rockstar Games were at the helm, you'd be concerned it was going to be a costly flop. However, the resultant incredibly in-depth and immersive Wild West simulator and open-world epic is nothing short of a triumph. The scope of missions, activities, games, characters, stories, systems and the world itself is just breathtaking. And with hundreds of hours of quality content on offer, it's one of the most no-brainer game purchases in 2019. Air Canada's hyper-polished football simulator may no longer have the shadow of Pro Evo looming over its shoulder. But that doesn't mean the latest FIFA is a complacent instrument. FIFA 19 makes changes to the much-loved formula in almost all the right places. So you're bound to find a mode to suit your footy tastes. The journey returns for its final installment as Alex Hunter tries to go from top-flight superstar to football icon. FUT has a new Divisions mode to improve long-term play. Kickoff mode has a new FIFA Street-style house rules edition and much more. The changes to shooting and ball physics also add a sleeker sense of movement across the field. While 2013's Beyond Two Souls failed to live up to the serial killer japes and awkward sex scenes of 2010's Heavy Rain, Detroit Become Human goes full science fiction with a story of artificial intelligence in rebellion, with mankind now using lifelike androids as a worldwide workforce. David Cage's latest opus will follow the story of 3 machines that begin, think, act and feel beyond their original programming. You'll encounter plenty of challenging scenarios, from solving murders to caring for a dying master. So expect a story that evolves with every dialogue choice and action. Back in 2014, the crew offered up a truncated version of the United States filled with races and challenges and all manner of Ubisoft-related tropes. It also wasn't very good, mainly because its racing lacked that wow factor. Fast forward to now and its sequel has looked to the Xbox-exclusive series Forza Horizon for inspiration, dropping the road trip setup of the first game in favor of a more accessible set of activities across its vast map. With powerboat racing, street races, drifting, dirt bikes and stunt planes, it's packed with things to do in vehicular form. Frontier might be more famous for the expansive universe of Elite Dangerous, but it also gave us the cutie management sim that is Zoo Tycoon. And it's these family-friendly series that served as the enhanced DNA for Jurassic World Evolution. The setup is simple: build your own theme park on one of 5 different islands, including pens full of every dinosaur you've seen gnashing the jaws in the films. Search for fossils, extract DNA, then breed your very own enhanced species. But watch out, your new creations might escape and run riot across your very own Jurassic World. Dontnod Entertainment, the Parisian studio perhaps more well known for the narrative wonder of Life is Strange, has turned its attention to an entirely new genre. But it's brought much of its love for stories and worlds that are shaped by your decisions and choices. Set in London in 1918, you play a doctor attempting to help the city through an outbreak of Spanish flu. Unfortunately, you've also just been turned into a vampire, forcing you to choose between healing people or draining them for blood. With support for stealthy non-kill playthroughs and all-out vampiric bloodbaths, It's proved to be a darkly hidden gem. While PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds helped put the battle royale genre, where a large group of players drop into a map, find weapons and kill each other to the last man, woman on the map. It's the colossal popularity of Epic Games' Fortnite has put it firmly on the map. The full game is actually about building a fort and surviving a night of monster-filled attacks. But the BR mode, which includes the ability to build ramps and walls on the fly for makeshift cover and traversing to higher ground, has proved a real winner on Twitch, YouTube and beyond. Who needs a chicken dinner? Many fans thought the Metal Gear series was doomed to be plunged into chaos after the controversial departure of series brainchild Hideo Kojima. However, Metal Gear Survive shows the series has plenty of life and is capable of producing an entertaining spin-off. What's most important about this title is that it isn't a traditional Metal Gear game. Instead, it serves as a reason for players to relive some of the gameplay elements the series has nailed in the past with a vital twist. Think of this installment as the Red Dead Redemption, Undead Nightmare of the Metal Gear series. After a wormhole opens in the game world, the player is forced to build and fortify a base while upgrading their own abilities and taking on new recruits. Survival elements play a key part in the game and add to the tangible feeling of desperation the game exudes. Managing your health, food, water and any injuries sustained is vital to continuing the grind towards satisfying progression. The game may not prominently feature any of the series' signature characters, but Metal Gear Survive shows that there is still plenty of fun to be had in this incredibly captivating world. Monster Hunter World manages to maintain the series' historically addictive backbone but makes the barrier to entry lower than ever so a slew of new players can experience gorgeous worlds and inspired creatures. The game is best suited to cooperative play but has been tailored to fit single-player only hunters all the same. Instead of displaying a litany of text when you boot up the game, the developers instead opted to spoon-feed the player information when it's needed. Monster Hunter's incredibly diverse worlds look crisp and run without a hiccup on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro. Getting friends together to chase down beautifully realized animals could be easier. But once everyone has teamed up, the game takes on an entirely new level of charm and companionship. Monster Hunter World strikes the perfect balance between catering for die-hard fans of the franchise and a huge set of newcomers at the same time. It succeeds without sacrificing any of its alluring characteristics that result in hundreds of hours lost slaying monsters, crafting improved items and exploring the game's vast open worlds. The PlayStation 4 rendition of Shadow of the Colossus cements Team Ico's heartfelt adventure as a true classic. The story about a man's journey to save a mystical woman by taking down 16 fantastical beasts has never looked or played better. 2 generations of extra power makes the quest feel more immersive and real than ever thanks to the removal of the PlayStation 2's technical limitations that stiffened up character models and severely cut draw distances. The exhilarating feeling you get when you charge horse first into the territory of a new Colossus with your sword lighting the way feels better than ever. Controls have also been greatly improved with remapped jump and grab buttons, making this game feel like a modern classic and not a title that saw its first outing over 12 years ago. Shadow of the Colossus gives players one of the most memorable crusades this generation and tops it off with an ending that will surely go down as one of the industry's best. Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is proof the series can live on without Nathan Drake and is testament to the charming cast of characters developer Naughty Dog has built over the last decade. The game sees the unlikely duo of Chloe Fraser and Nadine Ross team up in search of the Tusk of Ganesh. Naughty Dog is rivaled only by Rockstar Games in getting the best out of a console. And this trend continues with The Lost Legacy's depiction of India looking absolutely gorgeous and pixel perfect on the PlayStation 4 Pro. The game carries on the series' tradition of putting characters in scripted moments that play out like the greatest scenes from a Hollywood blockbuster. The game also takes the franchise forward by introducing an open-world level that sets the player free to roam about, discover treasures and witness the developing relationship between Chloe and Nadine. With Horizon Zero Dawn, Guerrilla Games not only showed they were capable of creating an inspired, new and unique RPG with an incredible amount of lure, but they could do so with an unparalleled amount of elegance. The game features a strong leading character in the form of Aloy. But the game's world steals the show with diverse landscapes and inhabiting animal-esque machines, forcing players to stop and take everything in. Especially in the PS4 Pro's 4K mode. The combat is some of the most original this generation, with primitive weaponry used to tackle the animalistic enemies. Each machine has its own weakness that requires the player to adjust the techniques to take them down quickly before more arrive. Horizon encourages the player to explore every crevice, complete every objective, and make Aloy the most powerful version of herself. The game is a testament to the financial commitment and creative freedoms Sony offers its first-party studios. Developer Psygnosis heritage lives on in the Wipeout Omega collection that contains the beloved trio of Wipeout HD, Wipeout HD Fury, and Wipeout 2048 on one Blu-ray disc. The series charms players instantaneously with its futuristic world and will have you replaying courses over and over again to beat your best time. The games provide an unparalleled sense of speed, but manage to do so while still giving the player a refined control scheme that allow the most talented to navigate a race without a single collision. A deep metagame can be found in the statistics of each of the available ships. Some will have beefed up armor while others are perfect for nailing corners that will shave off valuable seconds if you're going for a personal best. The Crash Bandicoot N.Sane trilogy doesn't just take the collection of games on the original PlayStation and cover them with a current-gen coat of paint. Instead, it serves to improve the first Crash game by adding a more accessible save mechanic that makes the package a lot less intimidating for those looking to dip their toes into the franchise for the first time. The game serves as a differentiator between a traditional HD upgrade and a complete remaster from the ground up. The graphics, sound, and content have been tweaked or added to in some fashion to make this the definitive way to experience three of Naughty Dog's classics. The platforming and memorable boss battles offer a significant challenge for players and deliver a euphoric moment of satisfaction when they're completed. The original Gravity Rush was criminally underplayed when it was released on the PlayStation Vita in 2012. However, Sony's Japan studio was lucky enough to get another crack at exploring the fantastical world of Cat. The game's protagonist, the adorable blonde, has the unique ability of shifting gravity to suit her needs, meaning she can pretty much fly and walk on any surface at will. The game features the same incredible art style from the original but dials it up significantly after being given the added horsepower of the PlayStation 4 to play with. Although the story is largely forgettable, cutscenes take place through comic book style sequences that still manage to create some hilarious moments. The gameplay is what you'll be sticking around for though, with the combat being given an added layer of depth and the traversal of zipping around by manipulating the world made easier and more precise. The much-loved Battlefield series travels back to World War I in this title, which manages to deliver excellent shooting action with a, for an FPS, surprisingly engaging story mode, a dump truckload of DLC, most of which is now free for all users, a top multiplayer operations mode that allows for 64-player multi-map scuffles, and the ability to hop into tanks and aircraft. 2. Keeps the action fresh each play session. The game isn't optimized for PS4 Pro, so those rocking Sony's flagship won't get any benefit from the juiced-up hardware. But the game's art style and graphics are top draw anyway, and along with some top music and sound effects, they make for an immersive gaming experience. Resident Evil 7 takes the series back to its roots by shaking off unnecessary over-the-top action sequences and replacing them with incredibly tense and frightening moments, rewarding exploration and a ton of nods to previous entries in the franchise. The player is also forced to conserve their resources. That adds to the game's expertly delivered feeling of vulnerability. The rush that ensues when you use the last of your bullets to land a headshot on a final enemy is one that can't be understated. Additionally, the game is one of the few to fully utilize Sony's PlayStation VR headset in a meaningful way. The player can experience Resident Evil 7 in its entirety in virtual reality and showcases the unparalleled immersion offered by the technology. The beauty of South Park has always been the contemporary nature of each episode. The fractured but whole carries on that legacy with its satirical approach to the superhero craze. Just like the stick of truth before it, The title is easily mistaken for an episode of the show when the HUD is not displayed. The involvement of series creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker is the reason this game will have you in fits of laughter from start to finish. The turn-based combat starts off relatively simple, but as the game progresses it becomes increasingly challenging and requires the player to put a lot more thought into every aspect of a battle. Little details such as where your characters are positioned have the power to drastically change the tide in any battle. Fans of the show will see this as another epic episode that pays homage to everything the series has done right for the last 20 years, while the contemporary jokes mean even newcomers will have to stop the sides from splitting. Friday the 13th, the game is a deep nod to fans of the films. The multiplayer-only title sees a team of up to 7 players controlling Camp Crystal Lake counselors attempting to escape the machete-wielding Jason Voorhees. The game is best experienced with a group of friends, and a microphone is a must to coordinate the asymmetrical maps and form a strategy to last the night. Surviving typically requires finding resources that are scattered across the campsite that are too spread out for a single player to find them all alone, reinforcing the need to play with others you are familiar with. Playing as Jason meanwhile offers an incredible power rush as you speed around the map, gouging the guts of each counselor trying to escape. The game offers a variety of costumes that pay homage to Friday fans that know the franchise inside and out. Although technical hiccups occur more than they should, the unparalleled rush of adrenaline you get as you speed away in a car with Jason following closely behind is worth the brief annoyance. The Evil Within 2 cements the survival horror genre as one that is thriving and where new titles can bloom. Developer Tango Gameworks clearly understands what made games of this ilk so popular in the first place. The Evil Within 2 constantly keeps you on edge and feeling vulnerable, although the narrative largely takes a back seat in this second installment. The gameplay and well-executed horror tropes will keep your sweaty hands clinging a little too tightly to the controller for some 15 hours. The game forces the player to do everything they can to survive, meaning you'll be scavenging everything you can from the semi-open world to ensure you have enough resources to live long enough to make it to the next deadly encounter. The Evil Within 2 understands that surviving by the skin of your teeth is what makes survival horror games great, and puts forward a wide variety of innovations that set a new bar for the genre. Many players were turned off when developer IO Interactive announced that the next-generation version of Hitman would be released episodically. However, the game turned out to be one of the few examples of this delivery done right. The series of levels takes Agent 47 across the world and throws him into incredibly expansive mission areas in Paris, Sapienza, Marrakesh and Bangkok, to name a few. However, it is the incredible amount of variety and diverse ways to complete objectives that gives this title an incredibly long tail. Hitman retains the series' classic formula of throwing Agent 47 into an open area, giving him a target and a seemingly endless amount of ways to take them out. However, this iteration takes that to a new level, providing incredibly detailed worlds and an astonishing amount of killing methods and disguises to experiment with. The title proves that Hitman is more relevant and endlessly replayable than ever. Developer IO Interactive should be commended for choosing a somewhat unconventional release method and nailing it to keep players invested episode after episode. Developer Insomniac Games paid a fantastic tribute to the first Ratchet & Clank game that made them a recognized developer across the industry with a remaster built from the ground up for PlayStation 4. Although the title diverges slightly from the plot of the original game, the main through points remain. However, players will be most enamored by the glorious graphical treatment that the Lombax and his robotic friend have received. The charming and incredibly diverse worlds look like something ripped straight from a Pixar cartoon. Of course, the game will have your eyes popping on the PlayStation 4 Pro, but things will still look great in 1080p on a standard or slim PlayStation 4. The quirky characters and litany of firearms have always been a staple of the Ratchet & Clank series, and the PlayStation 4 installment takes that to the next level with guns that will have you in fits of laughter from the moment you pull the trigger. Ratchet & Clank on the PlayStation 4 proves that there is not only a ton of potential for the series to climb to new heights on a new generation of hardware, but that it still has the power to delight fans new and old. Text source, T3.com.